Hi, I want to talk to you today about animals, and I know that all of you know a great deal about animals. In fact, you know more about animals than any other generation before you. You know them through videos, through zoos, through documentaries, through coffee table books, through National Geographic. You are all deeply familiar about animals. But what I want to address is something maybe you haven't thought of, and that is that all real animals are imaginary and all imaginary animals are real. Let me reiterate that. All real animals are imaginary and all imaginary animals are real. And the upshot of that is, if real and imaginary merge and we are responsible for both, then we have responsibility toward all animals. Now, how do I come to this point of thinking about these issues? I was originally trained as a zoologist, working with dolphins for over 10 years, studying them and writing about them, and more recently studying and reading and writing about sloths, including in Costa Rica. But by profession, I'm an English professor. And so what I do is think about culture. And in thinking about culture, I'm trying to think about the ways in which nature and culture intersect. In which ways do they control each other? In which ways do they play the same game? And what I want to get you to think about is that everything that we do with regard to animals has to do with naming and language. So let's begin with an example. Some of you may have pets at home, cats, dogs, reptiles, birds, and I'm willing to bet that virtually every one of your animals, every pet that you have, has a name. And as soon as you've named your animal, what you have done is recalibrate it as something that is imaginary. Having a name is not part of the natural world. It is something that you've constructed and imposed on the animal. And of course, you've complemented that in all sorts of ways by bringing certain kinds of things into your house. Animals shouldn't be in the house unless they're the three little pigs, and even they couldn't decide in which house they could be in or should be in. But you've brought in litter boxes, aquaria, toys, beds, all sorts of things that in fact sustain your animal in a space that is not constructed for animals at all. You've reimagined that space and you have reimagined the animal, and frankly you've reimagined yourself in that space for animals. So if we look at certain kinds of animals, like for example dogs, one of the things we need to remember is that they are not simply them, we are them. We are animals as well. And so when a dog looks at us, we, to the dog, and frankly to all of you, we, all of us, are among the largest animals that ever walked the face of the earth. All of us. Putting aside dinosaurs, putting aside everything else, we are huge. Not only are we huge, but we are dangerous. And why are we dangerous? Because we consume an enormous amount, because we squeeze out animals in every sector of the world, because we destroy environment throughout the world, and we are reckless. There's every reason for us to look inwardly and take responsibility of the human beast within. Now let me return to another animal, an animal that I know is very real, and that I see every day, or have seen him for the last 2 years. And that's my dog. He doesn't know he's my dog. He's got a chip in him that tells everybody else that he's my dog, but he is my dog. He doesn't know that he's owned by a person, and that in some sense I'm responsible for him. His name is Kramer. And he's named after, of course, the character in Seinfeld. And he is a very cute dog. I know you have to take my word for it, but trust me, he's as cute as they come. And when I walk that dog, and people know and see him and admire him, they always get a thrill out of seeing him, as people do who like dogs. But they get an extra special delight when they know his name is Kramer. They identify him immediately with the eccentric character on Seinfeld. And to be sure, when I'm looking down at him and when I'm playing at home with him, I think he's like Kramer as well. But the reality is, my dog has never seen Seinfeld. My dog has no idea who this imaginary character, Kramer, he has been created, is, and how he is supposed to emulate this imagined character. So the idea here for us, as we grasp how we approach animals, is to conceive of animals as constructions of our imagination. So I'm not just thinking about the animals that we have around us that we're familiar with. I want you to ramp up to all of the animals that we can think about in the world. There is no animal in the world that we haven't named either by giving it a scientific name or often by giving it a popular or familiar name. And there's no space in which those animals exist, at least in the 20th and 21st century, that isn't circumscribed or described or confined or bounded by us. That is part and parcel of how we engage animals. And I want you to think about that as clearly as you can, because that is the stepping stone to responsibility. Now, let me take a look at another kind of animal instead of the real animals, and look at an imaginary animal. And the imaginary animal I want to pick is Bigfoot. And I'm certain that all of you know something about Bigfoot, named in my native Canada, the Wendigo, the Sasquatch, related to the Yeti in the Himalayas. An animal that you would say doesn't exist. You would just dismiss it and throw it out of hand as something that is not even worth thinking about. And that may be true. It may be a hoax. But when I turn my television on, one of the first things I see when the commercials come on is this large creature eating beef jerky, and the ad says, "messing with Sasquatch." That animal is now part of advertising and part of my daily life. Sometimes when I go for a drink in the cooler, I look down and I see that it's a Yeti cooler. That animal has now, an imaginary animal, has entered my daily life on a regular basis. Imaginary animals have bearing in our lives. And if we're thinking about imaginary animals, especially Bigfoot, there's one in particular that's worth thinking about, and that is an Bigfoot that we're all familiar with, and that is Chewbacca. And I dare say there's nobody in this group who wouldn't be able to imitate Chewbacca's noise, which I'm not going to do, as well as you could moo like a cow. So there he is, the captain of the Millennial Falcon, co-captain of the Millennial Falcon, a product of George Lucas's imagination, who is now part and parcel of my daily reality, of the daily reality of everybody who watches Star Wars. So, you want to dismiss me now maybe as an English professor who comes up with these odd ideas, but think about all of the animals that are imaginary that you've incorporated in your daily life, the animals that you're responsible for and that help you feel closer to animals that are in the real world. And I can think about a number of animals. I can think of Scooby-Doo, I can think of My Little Pony, and I can think of even Smokey the Bear. So, where does this leave us in terms of responsibility? It's a complicated answer, and we've created a conundrum because we are very smart people. We use the term people to distinguish ourselves from animals. But we have created a language to create a distance between us and them. But we are much closer to them than we ever think. So, what do we have to do? I can't prescribe, and I'm not here to prescribe, ways in which you should interact with animals. Do you choose to eat them? Do you choose to wear them? Do you choose to use them for medicinal experiments or for cosmetic experiments or for any other purpose, keeping them in zoos or even keeping them as pets? That's not up to me. Those are personal choices for you. But what I can say is that every organism that exists, every animal, has been created, reimagined, reinvented, and resituated by us, by all of you. And in that world, in the world that is our making, we need to assume responsibility.